Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you may be hailing from. This is the Fedora Podcast. I'm your host, Eric the IT Guy Hendricks, and joining me is that wonderful, amazing Ask Noah guy, Noah Jalaya.
Welcome, Steve. Well, I guess I shouldn't welcome you, Eric. You should welcome me. I feel welcome to be here. Happy to be here, Eric.
It's almost as if you ran from one show to come do another show.
Just about. Actually, I didn't really run anywhere. I just kind of went, "Hey, bye, internet," and then I pushed a button, and then I jumped over here, and it was like magic. It wasn't magic, but it was like SCP. I started in one place, went to the other.
So for those of you that are joining us, Noah actually hosts his own show called the Ask Noah Show. It's live every Tuesday, and it actually goes out over not only the interwebs but the terrestrial radio as well. So fairly unique in that regard.
I think we are the only terrestrial talk radio show in the country that focuses on Linux and open source. You know, there's the Leo Laporte, the tech guy, and that sort of thing, and then there's the Kim Commando, and so there's other people in terrestrial radio talking about tech, but I don't know how many of them are doing open source and Linux.
There you go. Well, I know where I go to. I know where I go to ask all my nerdy questions, or usually play Stump the Chump. But hey. But that's not what we're here to talk about. But I did want to give a shout out to the Ask Noah Show. It's amazing content, really collaborative, and there's a Matrix community as well, which we'll include a link in the show notes. But swore I wouldn't do that, Noah. But there you go. I promoted your show. You're welcome.
Thanks. I appreciate that. We have a good time. You're welcome anytime. Everybody's welcome.
I did crash a few weeks ago.
2 weeks ago, yeah.
Showed up and said, I'm here for no other reason except to record a show.
That's right.
But so those of you that are joining us live, thank you. I know we had a last minute change in timing, but life happens and times have to change, especially if you're a volunteer based podcast. So thank you all for joining us live, and we see you all in the chat. Howdy, everybody. And a special shout out before we dive in to Noel Miller, who is sort of observing all the insanity that goes on behind the scenes, both before, during, and after we're recording. So he stepped up and volunteered when we asked for some producer help. So howdy, Noel, and thank you for volunteering to help keep us on track, because as it has been, I haven't even announced the topic for today, and we've been going for 3.5 minutes. So tonight we are talking about building a better Fedora laptop, and I can think of no better way to build a laptop to run Fedora than a laptop that I basically have built myself. So tonight we're going to be interviewing someone who's no stranger to Linux and open source about the framework laptops. There we go. I had to find the button. Matt Hartley, welcome to the Fedora Podcast.
Great to be here, guys. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for making the time.
Yeah. So let's start off with you. Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself, what you do for work, what you do for fun?
Certainly. My name is Matt Hartley. I am the Linux support lead for Framework Computer. My job is to act as the human conduit, the hand holder, the person that makes it all gel between the community and Framework specifically, and making sure that everyone's on the same page and that our customers are having that fantastic Linux, or in this case, Fedora experience.
Love it. So what do you do for fun?
Oh, fun. Yeah, no, I don't really do fun. I tried fun once. It was a lot of it was just too much lift. No, I'm kidding. I like to go for hiking with the dog, hanging out outside. I have an irresponsible addiction to retro gaming. Sometimes I take naps. A little bit of everything. Certainly.
That's very cool.
Fun.
Can you talk a little bit about the background of Framework? Tell me the story of how Framework got started, why they decided to build a computer that you could repair yourself, and how did you get involved with Framework?
So let's pick on which one we want to start with. I can start with where Framework got started. Now, I can only speak from my interpretation because obviously I wasn't there when it was originally formed, but the story behind it is that basically it's about making consumer electronics repairable, to make that a better purchasing decision, to where you're actually taking ownership of the items that you're purchasing. And in this case, we're looking at laptops and computers, but that does not by any stretch of the imagination mean that that is going to be the end all to be all. Who knows what
Mhm.
the future holds? But that's really what it's about, is about being less wasteful. It's about going back in time. If you think back in the old days when you could repair TV sets, you could pop off the back of it, make a peanut butter sandwich, discover the value of the fact that your tube is not fully discharged when you try and apply a screwdriver to it. Learned that once. Just going back to that era, taking that mindset back to where you're taking ownership in your stuff and making sure that that's something that you can really celebrate as a customer and as an end user. That, in my view, in my opinion, is really where Framework is aiming to hit the ball out of the park. Now, again, there may be a different official statement on that. You can certainly go to the Framework website and actually read the About Us as far as the official verbiage, but that's my interpretation.
Well, Framework trusted you with a microphone tonight, so it's the Matt Hartley show.
Well,
Whatever answer you come up with, that's what they're going to have to sign to. I mean, that's just the way that
usually,
works.
yeah, right. Surprise. Yeah. So, and as far as my whole thing of it, my how I came into this role is kind of unique. The long and short of it is, I was offered the opportunity. I readily accepted, and it was a natural match. I initially applied for a different position. This position opened up instead, ended up in this, and I hit the ground running, just because it's this old hat for me. I'm very familiar with being an intermediary between the community and others that are trying to get products and services to that community.
Can you talk a little bit about how that process got started? So they come to you and they say, Mr. Hartley, we would like you to be the, as you put it, I think, the human conduit between us, the company who's producing
Mhm.
this product, and the users that are going to go use the laptop and install Linux on it. And to that you say, well, of course I could do that, because I've been running Linux as my primary operating system for a long time. So these are my people. Right. And so I mean, you might have not phrased it exactly like that, but largely that's what was communicated. And so they say, all right, well, great, awesome. We're going to have Linux, and it's here we go. And here's these guides, and have at it. How do you go about going onto the internet and telling a bunch of people that there's this new laptop out? It's different than anything else you've ever seen before in your life. And Linux is going to be a first-class citizen, and I'm the guy that's going to help you do it. So if you run into problems, tell me. You kind of sort of painted a big
Mhm.
target on your back. Tell me about that.
I did. So first and foremost, I got to give a huge shout out to our marketing team, who does all especially with our community support manager, who's actually the person out there making sure that any community syncing that's happening, they're actually the one that helps make sure I'm aware of it, because there's so much going on. I obviously don't have the time to spend a ton of time in that. So, um, yeah, so that's something to be aware of. But as far as my interactions with the community, when I first started, primarily spent a fair portion of time on the forums, because that's really where the rubber hit the road, and where most of the customers were uh, really at, and in an environment where we could actually have that conversation, and in a public forum where we could talk about it. My job in this role was to literally provide a support mechanism for folks that were having trouble with their Linux distributions, and to make sure that they were having a good experience. I had to make some changes to the existing pattern of the way things were being done when I came on board. For example, I wanted to strip back our officially supported distributions. When I first came on board, we were generally supporting everything just out of the box. It's like, oh yeah, no, everything works great. Linux is Linux. It's easy peasy, whatever. Not necessarily. There are differences in kernels. There's differences in packages. There's differences in display managers. There's differences, and I mean, it goes on and on. There are finite differences. Things that can be done a little differently, and that's a lot of tracking to do. So one of the first things I did is I decided very early on that we're going to, because it was a very small team of me, focus on two specific distributions that we're going to give absolutely 100% our best effort official support on. And that was going to be Fedora, and that was going to be Ubuntu LTS.
Hmm.
Two reasons for that. Fedora we have a great relationship with them already, and Ubuntu LTS, it's pretty much lock and load and leave it, and you can kind of get a feel for where that's going to be. So that's really what that was. So my job in the community is to make sure that that was being properly explained, documents written, so on and so forth. You get the idea. I don't want to keep talking over you. So
No, you're fine. Tonight's all about you.
All right.
If you don't mind sharing, how did that
Yeah.
process go? So you're coming out, obviously.
Right.
I know the internet, okay, and I know the kind of people that are on the internet. So of course, when you said, "Hey, computer company, we'd like you to make Linux a first-class," and they said, "Mr. Hartley, which 2 distributions would you start with?" And you said Hannah Montana Linux, and I'm sorry, you said Fedora and Ubuntu. Those
Yeah.
are the 2 that I think are most prominent. Undoubtedly, the first thing that came back was, "Well, Matt, why didn't you support, and then insert whatever the favorite distro is, right? Why is NixOS not on there? Why is Manjaro not on there? Why? How do you address that?
So we actually have been working on a program that it's actually beginning to see fruit. We're slowly getting there. We've recently had some good interactions with Universal Blue. We've really actually George Castro came to me and said, "Hey, let's talk." And it's like, "Okay, cool. Let's do that." And we came to an agreement that this was definitely something we want to offer as a community supported distribution. And the idea behind that is that we put it on our landing page and we link to documentation that is community based, although technically I think I wrote some of it, but that's okay. Anyway, so that you get the idea with that. And the idea is that we begin building from that point. The value for our customers is that they know that people are actually testing on that hardware that we provide with these distributions, but the lift isn't on my lap exclusively, that it is in fact a community lift, and that's useful. So we're beginning to get there. I actually have a few more distributions that are going to be making an appearance. We made big strides with Linux Mint recently. Clem and I have been syncing back and forth and getting all that ironed out because there were a few tidbits that I wanted to get dialed in that he's already got locked and loaded, including fingerprint. We're working on getting fingerprint reader working well with Cinnamon for logging in, because out of the box I made it work, but it was kind of kludgy, and just kind of getting all that sorted. So a lot of that type of thing, just making sure that we're all aligned. But again, being very careful not to put the lift back into my lap, because at this moment, although we are currently hiring for someone to help me, uh, I'm basically my own person. I have one other person that actually is contracted with us that helps work with me, but for the most part, it lands in my lap as far as where I want the documentation to fall, what kind of support I'm planning on offering. And I know Noah knows this, I kind of take the approach, if I can't warranty it for life, I'm really cautious about it. So I'm very careful at not saying, "Oh yeah, you can run Hannah Montana Linux or whatever crazy distro and it's going to be just absolutely spotless." Yeah, if you're talking brand new hardware and you're rocking a 5.15 kernel, you're going to have a bad time. That's not going to work. It's going to run like a hot potato if it runs at all. So making sure that we're in a good place, that everything is basically tested and vetted, and we are seeing some traction there. NixOS is another one. We actually have been working with them for a while now, and I'm about ready to actually pull the trigger on that and get that on the landing page as well. So I'm pretty excited about it. So we are definitely making progress, but I have to take things slowly. And unfortunately, there is only one of me, and I am working with a number of different departments on a daily basis. Like today, probably 4 different departments on a multitude of different things. So I have to ruthlessly prioritize my time.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
How big is the framework team? And a curiosity.
Oh gosh, I'm 60 plus now, I believe, give or take. We are growing. We have jobs that are actually currently listed, so we are definitely growing the company, which is always exciting. Yeah, no, it's definitely interesting, but at the same time, we run a very tight ship that we all wear a lot of hats. For example, because I've done a lot of this stuff with podcasting and that sort of thing, I tend to spend a lot of time yammering in front of a camera, which is probably healthier than me just yammering in my office by myself, because at least someone's actually listening to me talk, theoretically.
That's
so that's always a bonus. Yeah.
Yes.
So.
Well, I mean, the way around that is just to talk into the microphone, even if you're not recording. Then significant others or children don't ask questions.
Just walk around outside mowing my lawn with a headset on, talking to myself. I could do that. I mean, I could give tutorials while I mow. It would be weird, but we could give that a try. Yeah, why not?
Could you talk a little bit about the modularity and repairability of the computer? So this is one of the things that comes into play with Framework, and it's really one of the things, Matt, that really drew my attention early on, because the first time I looked at it, I thought, what a joke. There's a laptop company and they're making this modular laptop. What happens if they go out of business? All the modules aren't going to be there and they're going to be left with a laptop that you can't repair. That's not very repairable at all. It sounds terrible.
Right.
Joke was on me, because 2.0 comes out and all these people that had bought the first generation one were like, "Oh, I can just upgrade my motherboard for $200 and some dollars." Then Cooler Master comes out with this desktop case thing, and now all of a sudden it's, well, not only can I upgrade my laptop, but also that the old one that came out turns into a single board computer that you can use for a desktop for an entirely different purpose. And I'm like, okay, now the joke's on me and I look stupid. And so it turns out there was more of a market for that than I think most people would have anticipated. I have been to events, Matt. I've been to, Ubuntu Summit and Scale, and in every time that Framework has a booth or Framework's there, the response is identical. I love your product. Can't believe, so amazing. Employees of companies that work with Linux want to buy it. How did you guys land on this concept of modularity and repairability? Where did that come from? Nobody else in the industry is doing it, and they're doing just fine. Why'd you guys go out in crazy land?
So my, again, interpreted understanding is this really came down to the founding team, our CEO, and then of course the founding engineers and other folks that helped found the company. When they came up with this concept and this idea, it was during peak COVID. It was an interesting time for them to be doing this, and they were able to pull it off because I think they realized that there was both philosophical value as well as practical value. For example, here, I don't know if you can see it, I have a USB-C expansion card. Who cares, right?
Yes.
Now, here's what's interesting. It's like, man, I really wish I had, let's say I also have audio jacks of this as well. Let's say it's like, no, I really wish I had an audio jack on the right side. Well, I can do that. Really wish I had an audio jack on the left side. I can do that too. I really wish I had 4 of them. Sure. You got to get the idea. So I think people began to pick up those little tidbits and say, oh, wow, there's inherent value in being able to pick where I want my ports and how I want that to work.
Yep.
There's inherent value in the fact that if I foolishly put this down on my laptop, close my laptop, smash my screen, I go, oh, well, that's unfortunate. I peel off the bezel and I replace the screen. You're not going to do that with other laptops. I think that once people got their hands on it and realized, oh, wait a minute, I can
how that works.
actually fix this, right? It's like, yeah, it's interesting. And of course, we have folks that actually take these little USB-Cs and put them into iPhones, because we have an audio jack version, and why not, right? And
Courage jack.
Courage jack, exactly, yes. So it's an interesting play. Again, I was fortunate enough to, while I came in kind of early, I mean, I guess we're still fairly early. I very much was, a fan of the company before I even, thought of seeking them out or applying. I was just amazed with what they're doing. I was like, this is absolutely rock star concept stuff. This is cool. And so I was very fortunate in that regard. And I definitely think they're onto something. I definitely think that what they're doing in Framework 16, Framework Laptop 16, and Framework Laptop 13, and the different variations is that, it's interesting that we're now beginning to see sizing choices, which is cool, and seeing where that goes in the future.
Talk about that
and
a little
not
bit.
just and not just the repairability aspect of it, but the upgradability.
That's
because
true.
maybe I'm just getting older, but I've got my eyes set on the 16-inch framework.
Yep.
And what I want to do is I want to get the nicest monitor that I can, 32 gigs of RAM,
Yep.
decent CPU, and for the workloads that I do, that's going to be fine for years.
Oh yeah.
The only question might be the GPU. I mean, an argument could be made for any of it, but 32 gigs of RAM in a laptop's probably all I'm going to need.
Theoretically,
And because I've
Can you
got
upgrade
a
the
server lab.
GPU?
Yes,
So-
you can pull the GPU out, buy a new
it
one.
is removable. So right now we have one AMD GPU available.
That's the one I want.
Yep, and that's our external unit. And of course, who knows what the future holds, but that is in fact removable, so that you can choose to do so. Now, what's interesting from the Linux user's point of view with that is a lot of folks think, yeah, but that thing's sitting there drawing power the whole time. No, it isn't. It actually goes into a lower power state. So when you're running this, it's asleep until you actually call it up, and that's in my documentation as well. So you actually have to call this up and say, hey, wakey, wakey, I want you to run this application or this game, DRI prime, so on and so forth.
And let me tell you, the spousal approval factor through the roof when I tell her, hey, I don't have to buy a new laptop every 2 or 3 years.
Exactly. And that's just family friendly goodness right there.
If you play your cards right, you never have to buy one again. Can you talk a little bit, Matt, about what the current model lineup is? What is the difference between, obviously, other than size, what's the difference between the 13-inch, the 16-inch? Why would I buy the Ryzen system? Why would I buy the Intel? What are some of the feedback you're hearing? What are people most happy with?
So when we first launched the AMD on the 13, for example, I knew just Linux users being Linux users, this thing was going to just basically be a Hot Wheels car going down a completely down a track at full speed, and it was, and it did really well. When we did the 16, for me personally, when I first saw our little intro videos, when you go to our YouTube channel and actually look at the, where they're basically taking apart a desktop computer and they're actually taking apart the Framework 16. When I first saw that, he's popping the graphics out and all that, I knew this thing was going to be ridiculous. It was going to be so cool. So I think with all that said, where the preference comes into it, I think it comes down to a combination of portability, because the Framework 16 is obviously going to have more weight to it. There's more going on. I also think that it's important to bear in mind that if you're gaming, and this actually surprised me with the 13-inch AMD board, you can do some medium to light gaming on that. It actually will run not amazingly well, but it will run AAA titles, although it's not its purpose. The 16, however, is obviously got a DGPU. You can run whatever you want, and so again, if you're piping your games into that, it will work quite nicely, so that's pretty slick. Speaking of which, Universal Blue, for example, does that for you automatically. When you put that on a framework, it actually indicates, hey, you're on a framework computer with the logo, and then of course it makes that selection for you. With Fedora, our guides will actually get you to where you need to be if you're running Steam, to make sure that you're in a good place and that you are in fact using your discrete GPU.
Very, very cool. Can you talk? Or I'm sorry. Go ahead, Eric.
Oh, go ahead. No.
Can you talk a little bit about what your preferences are as a person who works at Framework? So one of the things is, and my wife hates this, but I'm very proud of the fact when I go to clients and they're like, well, why would you recommend this? I'm like, listen, here's the thing. I don't sell you anything I don't put in my home. So anything that is for sale at Altispeed Technologies is something that I would buy and put in my home. My wife loves that. You working at Framework, you get to play with all the toys. So obviously you must have one that you want to take home. Which one is it and why?
So two things that I'm very fortunate. I get to work from home, which is amazing. So they are actually all lined up behind me. I have a few of them.
That's the answer, Matt.
I have a number of them. My preference actually right now, which is probably going to differ amongst our employees, but for myself personally, I'm a big fan of the 16, based on eyes, based on distance, and based on the fact that, honestly, properly configured, you get pretty decent battery life out of it, because again, you can actually control, especially with what Fedora has done with tuned, and of course I forget where this lands. It's like power profile gaming dash tuned or tuned power. Anyway, basically that little hybrid library they got going on there. That thing's pretty slick, because you can actually I won't get down the rabbit hole on that one, but you get pretty good battery life on that, and AMD's done a good job at making sure that everything's well tuned out. Shout out to Mario at AMD, awesome job as always. Yeah, it's been pretty cool. So I'm a big fan of the 16 myself. That's generally what I prefer to use. If I was to buy one, that's probably where I'm landing as a consumer, just because it meets my needs. My relatives probably more in the 13-inch. Now, AMD versus Intel, honestly, it's going to come down to preference. There are differences. There's differences in the way the expansion ports work, for example. There's obviously just really comes down to what kind of ecosystem you're looking to jump into. But I'm an AMD person. That's been my preference. But the new Intel stuff is pretty exciting. I've been pretty happy with it.
JS Car in the chat room says, what about risk support?
So we are currently in a partnership with Deep Computing. They are actually producing their own motherboard, and there is a RISC-V board that is they're working on, and that's exciting. And we have been excited to see what they're going to be doing with that. But that's going to be all them. We will obviously be providing our part of it. I'm not going to speak too much on this because it's still very much, I'm still learning all the ins and outs of it, but they will be the ones providing the support, for example. So when you have an issue, you would then reach out to them and say, hey, this image of Fedora that you have is not doing something I might expect, or so on and so forth. It's very much going to be a interesting play, because I think this is uncharted territory, and it's both exciting and it's going to be interesting to watch. I don't know where all that lands, but I think that they're really onto something cool, because this is not really something you see every day. You don't see RISC-V boards on a daily basis. It's interesting.
And here's the thing, not to pour any water on the parade, but
yeah,
what is the practical purpose of a RISC-V board in a laptop?
I think more than anything, it comes down to someone that wants a lab environment and understands its benefits and its limitations, and that's something that they want to do. You're not going to run games on it. You're not probably most people probably are not the target audience. Again, I don't know because I'm not necessarily even the target audience because it's not something I'm using on a day-to-day basis. But I think it's an interesting idea, and I think that exploring beyond your typical AMD and Intel ecosystems is interesting. I think it's fascinating to see where that lands and to see that third option. Kind of seeing a whole different approach to stuff. Who knows where it is in 5 years? I mean, it could be gangbusters. I'm really excited with what they're doing. It'll be interesting to see how that lands.
100%.
Yeah.
Well, especially when you factor in that NVIDIA's gone just absolutely crazy. And then on the flip side, you have Intel that's struggling financially and kind of struggling to find what their future looks like. There's a lot of room in this space for risk to come in and change how things are done. I think risk and framework would make a lot of sense together.
Well, and I think that, and I can't speak to those things specifically, but I can say that I think anytime you introduce new competition into an environment, it makes everyone better. I think I think it's healthy for Intel. I think it's healthy for AMD. I think it's healthy in general. But I would say that they are targeting vastly different markets. So very important to distinguish that.
Can you talk a little bit about providing support for Linux on a laptop? I want to start here, Matt. Could you walk us through from Framework's perspective? One of the things that I think is interesting is, well, actually, there's two things. I'd be remiss if I didn't say every presentation I've seen by Framework. You guys have this habit of you walk up and you plug a laptop in, which is normal, and then the screen mirrors and shows up on the projector, which is normal, and then they begin speaking off of the laptop and presenting on the display, which is normal, and then they rip parts out of the laptop, which is not normal. It's not what you're supposed to do when you're presenting. Don't take your laptop apart in the middle of the presentation. And I've seen it multiple times, and here's the funny thing. It never breaks. It always goes back together, and it comes apart really easily. And so I guess all that to say, you set out to do this thing, right? You set out to say, hey, we're going to build this Linux laptop. And at the same time, you're dealing with a customer base that some of them are going to want Windows, some of them are going to want one distro, some of them are going to want another. Is Linux really a first-class citizen from Framework's perspective? And if so, how much work goes into the back end to make that work? Does it just work out of the box like it does with the laptops at Best Buy? Or do you have to engage your electrical engineers and your software engineers to make some tweaky-toos?
So yes to that. We definitely do make some tweaks behind the scenes, and it's stuff that I don't think really you'd have to spend some time on GitHub to actually see some of the stuff that's actually happening. But the most readily obvious example is when I buy a laptop off of a shelf at a big box store. Odds are pretty solid that fingerprint reader is going to be and not going to work, right? Pretty good odds of that. We actually go through and make sure that we're working with our vendors to ensure that firmware is compatible. Have there been instances in the past where there's a regression in the firmware and an update or something, or maybe there's a firmware release that didn't quite gel? Certainly, that can happen, especially when you're producing thousands of these things. But we always have my job is to make sure we have a plan B when that happens, and we do. For the most part, when everything's firing on all cylinders, when you have that fingerprint reader in your input kit for your laptop, you're good to go. You literally go and just register it. You're done. The worst case scenario, your fingerprint just doesn't cooperate with fingerprint readers like mine. Fun trick, breathe on your finger, put it on your fingerprint reader on your phone or on your computer. It will probably work almost every time. It's a little hack for you guys. Yeah, it's something I learned because my fingerprints are terrible. So, it was something I learned. Is like, oh, okay, that helped also with troubleshooting, which goes back into making my job is Framework does a fantastic job at making sure the stuff's good to go out of the box. However, there can be, as we all know, regressions, bugs, new challenges, things that are discovered later that pop up into the kernel. Who knows? There's always something, and my job is to make sure that we are collecting those bug reports, getting that out there, making sure those are taken care of and put out to those that need to see it internally as well as externally, and also making sure that we're in a place to where we know that. And this really, honestly, is probably the summary of my job in 2025 and in the latter half of 2024 is Captain Plan B. If something regresses or goes sideways, I better have a parameter for that. I better have a means of making sure that they're able to work past that without sacrificing something significant. And that can happen. And the interesting challenge for customers is making sure that they understand that it's Linux. This does happen. No, it happens with any operating system, but Linux moves really quickly. And so, unlike some proprietary operating systems, you do have recourse. We do have things you can do. Older kernels, parameters, making sure that you're fully up to date, double checking your firmware. There's a number of things you can do. Internally, we're always working to refine things internally with firmware and BIOS and making sure we're in the best possible place possible for everyone to have a good experience. But yeah, so
very cool.
So let's say that I've already got the wife sign off, so we're good there.
right on.
Now we just need utility companies and schools and whatnot to stop raising prices on everything. So I get my Fedora Linux powered framework 16, all AMD because that's how you build a laptop. Sorry, I just flame war in the chat now, I'm sure, but I had to.
I love them both equally, but hey, you do you.
Eric, I'm sorry, I got a little confused there. What are you using right now?
Yeah, we won't go there.
Okay.
Hey, if I had the funds, I would not be using my work issued MacBook Pro.
That's fair.
Thanks, Noah. Anyway, so I buy it. It shows up. It's beautiful. I've already, because I'm excited for this thing to show up, I've already got Fedora Linux 41 showing up, or already burned to a USB stick. I plug it in. I hit an issue. Fedora Linux 41 won't install. What do I do?
That is a very good question. Generally speaking, when a customer such as yourself runs into that issue, they have two common paths that they'll take. The path that I prefer they take and the path they actually take. The path they usually take is Reddit, and that's fine. Our community support manager will generally identify that, alert me to it, and if it's something that we need to get them into a ticket on, we will. Which brings me to where I would like these things to end up. I prefer they end up in a ticket because then we can then take logs and gather things and see what's going on. In your particular case, that's not a thing because you're not even able to get it to work. But again, we can then walk through your processes of, okay, what did you use to create the USB key? For example, Belina Etcher, I discovered recently, and maybe I'm insane, but for whatever reason, I have had 3 separate people, including myself, making 4, that have failed to get that to work in Windows 11. Yay, cool. So, catching that, I was able to adjust the docs.
Problem.
Yeah. Yes, obviously, but because we do have customers actually switching from Windows, though, that's the gotcha. We have a lot of people coming from Windows and a lot of people coming from OS 10 to Linux. Hey, whatever gets you there, as long as you're moving on to the right thing, we're good with that. So if they're moving on to Fedora, how did they create their USB key? Obviously, if you're creating it in Fedora, you're creating it in other Linux distributions. This is pretty much straightforward, easy. You have a few different ways of doing that, but when you're doing it in other operating systems, it's surprisingly limited, even in 2025. It surprises me how much easier it is in Linux than it is on other operating systems. But we have to make sure we're in a good place for that. So we get you into a ticket. We understand how you got to the state, and then try to work with you to make sure that we are like, okay, I see the issue. You literally copied files from a mounted disk on over, and there's no. I've seen this sort of thing before, right? So making sure that you're in a good place, that we have you with a bootable drive. Are you able to get to the boot menu? Are you tapping F12? Is function locked? There's a number of possibilities there that we have to explore. And then, of course, it just really comes down to sometimes I need to actually get pictures. What are you seeing? All these things are much, much easier in a ticket versus Reddit or the forums. That being said, some people still prefer to post to the forums or Reddit to get their answers, and then the community will come and echo their thoughts and ideas, and then we'll get it in a ticket eventually anyway. So.
Very nice.
Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about what resources are available for Fedora users to make it really sing on the laptop? So, okay, fine. I can install an operating system, Matt, but how do I get it such that the experience on a framework it's going to feel like an out-of-the-box experience if I was to purchase from some manufacturer? You guys obviously specialize in making sure that Linux is going to run really well. So how does one get a tailored, the best experience possible on a framework laptop with Fedora?
The interesting thing is theoretically, ideally, in most cases, frankly, outside of an occasional regression, you're good to go out of the box. You are, as long as you created your USB key correctly, you're done.
Same is true of Ubuntu?
KDE. Yep. Ubuntu is a little different. I we have found that we are happiest with the LTS releases. While they tend to run a little long in the tooth, they tend to be a little better tested. So I feel better with that, especially when you get into your point releases. Usually 0.1 onward in any LTS is generally a pretty sweet spot anyway. But with Fedora specifically, honestly, it just works. That being said, we do have guides for both Ubuntu and Fedora that walk you through some of the niceties. For example, if you want to I don't know, depending on what you're looking to do, if you're having issues with troubleshooting or something like that, we actually have guides that will help you with that. But for the most part, ideally with Fedora specifically, nah, you're good. It will just run out of the box. Everything's good to go. There are additional things that may crop up that will appear in our docs as necessary if there's a parameter that needs to be added until something gets worked through. But for the most part, yeah, you should be good to go.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So one of the things that I love about being positioned with the Fedora community is just the sheer power behind the community, the
That's
number
right.
of people, the passion that they
That's right.
have for Fedora Linux. It's really the secret weapon of the distribution.
That's
And
right.
the question that I always ask on behalf of our listeners every episode is, how can the community get involved? How can Fedora users, how can Fedora developers help make framework a better experience for Fedora Linux users?
That is a solid question, and I appreciate you asking that. In 2025, as we move forward, I am actually hiring a Linux support specialist to take on some of the day-to-day grind work that I'm doing currently to better focus on distro partnerships and making sure that these things are happening. With that in mind, the best bet, honestly, is to get into our Matrix chat. That's a good place. We actually have one specifically for Fedora that you guys can jump into. You can definitely jump into that. Hop onto our forums and just continue to be active there. I think that's also good. You can always tag me. That's one option as well. But it's an important thing to consider that you need to understand that some things are made, some choices and decisions are made for a reason. So, like for example, uh, like working with Tune, for example, generally speaking, we prefer you just work with a vanilla installation. However, as Neil, who I think is still in the chat room, will point out, there is actually a Flatpak package that you can run if you want more access to Tune profiles, and that's fantastic. You can do so, but you don't have to. So for folks that want to begin to expand on that experience and make this even better and more powerful, I think the forums are a good place to get started. We have actually a lot of Fedora folks that at least two or three that I can think of that hang out there, and Matrix chat's good. But for the most part, tag me, email me, whatever. We'll work something out. I'll have more time on my hands this coming year. Right now is definitely looking pretty promising for that, so that we can begin to grow that experience.
Absolutely.
Okay, so we had a question in the chat, and this will kind of move us into the what juicy tidbits are coming. J-Scar was asking about webcams, and I'll kind of take his question and zoom out a little bit. What's coming? What good bits can you share with our listeners?
So what you see now is what we have currently available. That's really as far as I can go with that. But we do like to, but we actually do have some pretty good stuff there. Our webcams are quite good, and using Linux utilities, you can actually decide what settings you want to run with. There's a couple of utilities you can find that you can actually use for that, both GUI and of course, if you're a command line warrior, you can also go that route. It's a little trickier, but get your feet in there, play with it a little bit. But the webcams are pretty solid. Check the marketplace. Anything new that does happen, it's going to appear there. So
it's not necessarily why I would have chosen to purchase a framework laptop or get involved. But one of the things that I think stands up to a lot of people is the concept of sustainability, the idea that we're just going to put less e-waste into the environment. And I tell people all the time, you can go into the Apple store and you can buy a brand new MacBook for $2,000 or $3,000. And it doesn't matter how good care you take of it. It doesn't care what model you get. It doesn't matter how religious you are on keeping up to date on software updates. At some point in 4 to 5 to 6 to 7 years, that laptop is going to become a pile of trash because at some point Apple is going to stop shipping software for it. And with the latest generation of these ARM computers, you literally cannot load anything else on the computer. And even things like Asahi Linux for a while had to be wrapped inside of an Apple app because it just can't sign any other way. And even now, there's no way to actually wipe Mac OS off. You need it to be able to update the firmware and stuff. And so it's the antithesis of being something that's upgradable or repairable, but it also contributes to a lot of e-waste. Can you talk about some of the work that Framework is doing to reduce the amount of e-waste that we have?
I think first and foremost, the most important thing we try to do to avoid additional e-waste is making sure that we're changing the minds and the souls of the way people use their computers by making sure that I have, let's say, an 11th gen, and it's like, wow, I'm super done with this. I want one of the newer boards. Now, in a normal circumstance, you would take your computer and pitch it, recycle it, whatever. Maybe try and repurpose it. Most likely, probably end up donating it. We want to see people continue to use that stuff. So I think from our point of view is that can we repurpose existing working hardware in your laptop? A good example is the motherboard that we've talked about that previously, putting that into a Cooler Master case, 3D printing a case. We have people that have made handheld consoles out of them, but getting value of that, putting that maybe in a kid's room and actually making a kid's computer with it. That keeps it in the home. That assures that it doesn't end up in a landfill. That's really the end goal here. Also, when something does fault out, a lot of times it can actually be when you like RMA something, that can actually be, we can look at that and be like, oh, actually, it may not actually be broken. It may literally be something that is repairable. That does happen. Other instances, there's software causes that something may actually be repairable. But the big component is making sure that we're not saying, wow, this keyboard or this, a component of my computer is broken, therefore I need to toss the entire thing. We can actually drill down on that individual component and figure out where that lands. And if you go to the Framework website, they talk a little bit more about specifically what that really means, far better and more eloquently than I ever could. But it actually discusses what we're trying to do. And we talk about it a lot in our blog posts as well, as to really what we're trying to do and making sure that we're trying to keep things to where they are being reused. We're repairing as much as we can in-house, repurposing stuff that might not be, the latest and greatest, but making sure that it has a new home. But there's no silver bullet. It just kind of depends on the issue. If I snap my keyboard in half, it's probably broken. But the good news is that keyboard is not an entire laptop, and that's a big difference right there. Or a webcam that goes sideways, I can replace that versus the entire computer. You begin to see where that diminishes e-waste significantly just in tackling it component by component versus the entire laptop itself.
Well, the marketplace really attests to that because I was just skimming through it as we were talking a bit earlier, and the first thing that jumped out at me was just the different modules of RAM,
Mhm.
and to think most laptops probably nowadays RAM is soldered in.
That's right.
What you buy from the big box store is what you
That's right.
get, and if you went cheap and got 16 gigs and then you decided you needed 32, well, you're buying a whole new device. But not just RAM,
Mhm.
but I mean there was cables,
Mhm.
there was speakers. I mean, there's little bits and pieces that I wouldn't have even thought of when considering, like Noah and I travel quite a bit for work and for the community, and neither of us are exactly gentle with hardware. So, I mean, you spend 3 days at a conference lugging it from
Sure.
one interview to the next, your laptop's going to see better days.
That's right.
But just the amount of components that were listed on the marketplace really is a testament to the sustainability of not only product but the reusability of these products as well.
That's right. That's right. It's interesting you bring that up, and it actually reminds me of a story that I wanted to share with you. That's still in the same vein as this. I was at a conference in Seattle, and George Castro was there, and of course George being George is trying to get everyone in the world to use Universal Blue, and we had one person that actually had a Framework laptop, and it wasn't working. So I naturally, me being me and still PC repair minded, I meander on over to their booth and I begin to take it apart. They're watching me do this. I'm literally just popping it apart, moving stuff around, actually turned out to be a bad drive. But I was able to do it in like 3 minutes, and I was just blowing people's minds. And I think that's exciting. I think people begin to get their minds around that. I think that really brings it all home for them, and that this is that connection point. I think it's so anyway. I just had to share that with you because I think it's still in the same vein for the most part. So.
Absolutely. Can you talk a little bit about what the future plans are from Framework? What's coming up around the corner?
So honestly, the number one place to find that information out is going to be on our blog, on our social channels. You'll hear it first there. Obviously we're never idle. We're never just sitting on our hands. We're always busy with sustainment. We're also always busy on whatever the latest and greatest, whatever's we have in the works happening. But as far as specifics, no, can't really talk about that, but I can definitely tell you that we are not idle and we are always working on something cool. So.
Well, can't say we didn't try. Because trust me, folks,
I give you points for that. I give you points.
I tried to twist Matt's arm before the show to give us something, but he's been brainwashed well. I mean, he's been trained well.
My bolts had been tightened. Yeah, no, I definitely wish I could elaborate on that more, but it's just one of those things to where why spoil the surprise?
That's fair.
Just keep watching. We stay busy.
You want to keep the interest. You want to keep the attention on the thing.
That's right. That's right. And quite frankly, you may notice that during holidays and whatnot, we don't do sales in that regard. We don't do holiday sales. If we do sales, it's literally, we have a secondary marketplace for refurbished items. We're excited about that. So if someone's looking to get in at a lower level that don't necessarily want to buy brand new, they can. You can actually go that route as they become available. So you can actually purchase refurbished, which again, less e-waste. You see where that goes. So.
I like that because that means that unlike I've built my own towers for years.
Sure.
And the trick to making that cheaper was you keep the box, you keep the packaging, and when you're done with that GPU, you throw it up on eBay and get screwed out of a ton of money. But at least you make something back, and then you go and you buy a new one. I mean, that's kind of been my approach. But Framework kind of builds that into the market. I love that.
That's right. That's right. And we do have people that sell it on their own as well, and that's certainly doable. So
if somebody's watching this and they're thinking to themselves, Matt, I want to get a Framework. That sounds like my next laptop. How do people do that?
So you're going to want to, first of all, launch your favorite web browser. I have no preference. Whatever suits you, suits me. You want to go to frame.work and get to know what we're about. Explore our offerings in the marketplace and see what matches your needs. You're going to want to choose a DIY because obviously, if you're watching this podcast, you're someone that wants to build their own computers, because I know I certainly am that way. And there's something very satisfying about assembling your own laptop. And from there, you can pick the distribution you would like to have on that. I recommend Fedora. Yep.
Yeah, I mean, as someone who's built PC towers, I've watched some of the assembly videos for these laptops, and it's even less than that. It's even easier than that. If you can slide like one of those USB-C adapter cards into a slot that's already pre-marked, you're gold. And if you can manage a screwdriver,
exactly. I have one right here.
Save quite a bit of money.
Yeah, every DIY kit actually comes with one of these, and everything you have from spooger to the screwdriver itself, it's for like our 13-inch. It's like, I think it's 4 screws in the back. Everything's labeled. Everything inside of a Framework laptop has a QR code. This is kind of a big deal. I don't know what that is, but it broke. Think, oh, that's what I need. Click, and then you can actually go ahead and replace that component versus the entire laptop.
Well, I'm sold. So I just got to go and maybe I'll go sell plasma or something.
Get yourself a few.
Just to get a Framework laptop for logging your entries of blood work.
There you go. Yeah, or Noel's in the producer chat giving me a hard time about my MacBook.
That's good. That's why he's the producer.
We won't
keeping you on.
Hey, I mean, if you all want to pay for kids' school supplies for this current semester, I'd be happy to just pocket that money for laptop funds.
Fair enough. I get that.
So you see where your priorities are: school, laptop.
Yeah, school. I mean, kind of weigh it out. Yeah. That's
I
right.
mean, they'll be fine, right? AI will replace all the jobs.
Yeah,
So,
it really takes care of itself. You don't need working. You don't need that. Yeah.
so Matt, I really want to thank you for joining us and for kind of wrapping up your day with us. But
Of
do
course.
you have any closing thoughts? Any last things you want to share with our audience?
Oh goodness. I think the only thing I would really say is I appreciate the fact that I have had an opportunity over the last 20 plus years to watch the Linux community explode. And I'm so excited for where we're headed in the future. I think that more so than ever, we are going to see adoption from other operating systems like we've never seen before. I've been pretty right on that so far, and I think this year is going to be ridiculous. I'm already beginning to see it where I'm at. I'm definitely seeing a massive Windows is the best marketing tool in the world, man. Just you keep on doing that Windows 11 thing. It's awesome. You just keep on doing that, and I'm being facetious, but I'm also being somewhat serious. It's like, it's true. I mean, it's a lot of folks. It's just not their cup of tea, and for those that are, that's cool. But I'm excited to see the actual adoption of Linux, and I'm delighted and excited to see that Framework takes this so seriously, and I can say that and mean it, and really own that statement.
So would you say, like our producer, that this is the year of the Linux desktop?
Oh yeah, every year's the Linux desktop. I think
That's the answer. That's right, Matt. That's the answer.
right.
Every year is the year of the Linux desktop.
going even farther, anytime you can convert, and Noah will back this up, anytime you can convert someone, that's the year of the Linux desktop.
That's right. That's right. It's just a matter of attitude and persistence. That's all, man. It's not.
That's
So
right.
I promised I wasn't going to do this during pre-show, but I
Sure.
lied. So the funny thing is, and I've praised Noah before, but I'll share this with Matt as well.
Yeah, of course.
But for the last, gosh, what is this, 2025 now? So 13, 14 years that I've been involved with the open source from a community perspective. It like every year's been the year of the Linux desktop, and I don't think it's been what we thought it was going to be. But I mean, like you said, every person that we convert off of something that they hate onto something that they love is a win. But like, I mean, for years I've watched Matt and Noah working in this community, working in the podcasting space, in the community space, driving attention. And so to hang out with the both of you, it's kind of a confirmation of what my career has become.
Oh,
Because if it wasn't for voices in the community like Matt and Noah here, I wouldn't be where I'm at. I wouldn't be doing the kind of work I'm doing. I'd probably still be hating life as a Linux systems administrator instead of teaching others how to use Linux, how to get involved with open source. So thank you both for all that you've done over all the years that you've been a part of it.
You bet, man.
yeah.
Aim to
Well,
please.
and now you have verification that yes, Matt really does talk in circles that much. It's a real thing. I mean, Noah's known it, but now you know as well. So now everyone here watching it knows. And yeah, I've said absolutely nothing of any value just now. See how that works.
You know what?
But we
see how many
waited until
frameworks.
52 minutes in to point that out. So
We'll wait to see how many framework laptops fly off the shelf. Then we'll make that We'll draw that conclusion after that.
Right on.
there you go. Yeah,
Love it.
is
Love it.
there a comment section on the order form or anything?
That's a great question. I should know the answer to that. I don't believe there is, not specifically. I think everything's pretty well dialed in, and actually it's just a choice that you make going through the purchase. Again, because they just, I work
Send him
there,
to
so
him.
it's
He
a little
doesn't pay
different.
for him. What would he? How would he not?
Right.
Wasn't going to say that, but it's a little different. So yeah, it's a little different in my experience. But
So if you're listening to this and you do go and buy a framework laptop, there's absolutely no money being exchanged here. This is completely off the cuff. But if there is some kind of a comment section or anywhere where you can any free text field, just mention that you heard about framework or that
Matt
this episode.
made me do it.
he wouldn't stop talking. He just kept going and going. No,
I
one thing.
offered to buy a laptop just to get him to shut up.
Exactly. Yes, you understand. One thing you can do, we actually have in our forums, if you wanted to just simply start a thread, I mean, that would
There you
probably
go,
be
yeah.
the best bet. Yeah.
Yeah. Again, no, this is not a sponsorship. This is not an endorsement. Just out of sheer curiosity, I want to see how many. I want to see what happens with Fedora and Framework being officially partners.
Yeah.
So
Awesome.
so those were my closing thoughts. Noah, any last thoughts you want to share?
I don't I don't think so. I really appreciate what you guys are doing. 15 years ago, Matt, the landscape was different, right? I mean, we just didn't have. I mean, you had System 76. They were kind of the company that did Linux computers. And now you've got, you name a distro and there's some hardware OEM vendor that's working with them. And so the landscape has definitely shifted, and Framework is unique because it's one of the only computers out there, literally one of the only computers out there that you can buy once and maintain forever. And I think as time goes on, I think that's going to become more appealing to nerds. I don't think nerds like buying stuff over and over again, but I do think they like having the newest, greatest thing. And so you've kind of given us the best of both worlds.
I appreciate that. I definitely think you're right. I think that people are beginning to realize that. I think one thing I found in events is folks that have been watching us for some time, they actually come to an event and pick one of these up and watch me, like, literally in real time, pop a keyboard off and slide it to the right and put in other little slots and stuff like that. Just start manipulating the laptop without turning it off on the Framework 16. They see things like that and they're like, oh, now I get it.
Now I get it.
They're able to take that ownership and to actually enjoy their laptop as something fun to do and not just a tool.
I love it.
All right, folks. Well, Matt, once again, thank you very much. I really appreciate you graciously providing us some of your time and for some laughs, and we even made fun of Noah a little bit. So that's a successful Fedora podcast episode in my book.
Absolutely. But, I appreciate you definitely appreciate you having me. And
you're welcome back anytime.
Oh, thank you. Appreciate that.
So we've been interviewing Matt Hartley and on today's episode of the Fedora podcast. So if you want to go get your hands on your very own Linux-powered build-it-yourself laptop, it really is like building your own PC tower, but in a laptop form factor. It's an amazing product. I myself really want to get my hands on one. Some of the biggest Linux nerds that I know and trust swear by their frameworks and have seen things break and then they've been able to fix it themselves, or like Noah pointed out, we've seen framework people go up and take their laptops apart during a presentation. So if you're looking for an amazing product, if you're looking for a new laptop, or if you just have money that you want to spend, I can't think of a better place to go and spend it unless you send it to my kids' college fund. That might help too. But thank you all for joining us. Thank you for tuning in. Make sure to subscribe. We're getting very, very, very close to 10,000 subscribers on our YouTube channel, which is amazing. Fedora community, thank you all so much for listening to me ramble on week after week. Noah, thank you for joining me and bailing me out of conversations. And we're getting close to, I think, almost 70,000 downloads on the audio side. So this podcast has grown so much over the last few years. Really excited. Coming up, we've got Matthew Miller, the Fedora project lead, here in a few weeks. We're going to talk about Fedora community in 2025. We're going to be interviewing a Fedora contributor in 2 weeks. So we'll be live for that conversation. So if you're curious how to get involved and what that looks like, definitely going to be an episode you won't want to miss. So if you subscribe, make sure to hit that notification icon so that you get notified when we go live, in case we have to change times again. But until then, check out the backlog. This has been episode number 44, so you've got plenty of content you can check out. So until then, thank you very much. And on behalf of Matt Hartley, Noah Shalai, and myself, we will see you next time.
Bye-bye.